Okay, so if there's a wave of trans women who dominate the sport against other women, all those sports will become less interesting based on how we all watch sports. Even the Super Bowl here in the United States, if it's a blowout by halftime, nobody watches the second half.
Right.
Neil deGrasse Tyson just destroyed Piers Morgan with facts and logic about the whole debate on trans women competing in biological women's sports. And let's be honest here, it's not even about taking sides, but more about pointing out how the math and science don't exactly add up for everyone involved.
People who are trans. It's on the frontier of how to resolve that. And I'm making this up now. Imagine the future of sports does not distinguish sex. It distinguishes and sorts people by hormone ratios. I'm making this up, but imagine that if that were the case. That would be interesting.
Neil came in with his usual no-nonsense vibe, while Piers, bless his argumentative little heart, crumbled under the weight of actual reasoning. You could almost hear the gears in Piers's head grinding to a halt as Neil laid out point after point. So, keep watching, because trust me, this is one for the books.
And wrestling, there are people who weigh, sorry, am I using pounds here, 125 pounds, right on up to 240 pounds. They don't wrestle each other. The entire sport separates people so that the contest is interesting.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to physical performance, let's not kid ourselves. Men and women are biologically different, and the numbers don't lie.
I noticed is, in every event, on average, men were 10% faster than women. 10% faster. And
He is right here. Just look at the Olympics. Men are consistently faster, stronger, and frankly, built for raw power in ways that women biologically aren't. Speed? Men are about 10% faster, whether we're talking sprints or marathons. Strength? That gap is even wider, with men being around 50% stronger in powerlifting and other strength-based sports. These stats aren't just plucked out of a science textbook for fun. They're reality, driven by differences in muscle mass, lung capacity, and bone density. And it's exactly why sports have always separated men and women. It's not discrimination, it's common sense. Throw everyone into one big gender-neutral competition, and let's be honest, most women wouldn't stand a chance. Even Piers Morgan, who loves to argue like it's a sport of its own, couldn't challenge this part. He grudgingly admitted that biology is biology. But of course, he couldn't just leave it there. He had to stir the pot and question how these undeniable facts apply to trans athletes competing in women's sports. That's when things started to get spicy.
Fought a woman boxer, a female woman boxer, who was the same weight division, he would annihilate her.
Now, this isn't just a philosophical debate, it's already playing out in the real world. A United Nations report says trans athletes have won around 900 medals in women's sports globally. 900. That's not just a drop in the bucket, that's the bucket overflowing. Cases like Barbara Banda, the Zambian footballer crushing it in women's tournaments, only to face bans over sex eligibility issues, highlight how murky this situation has become. And don't forget the outrage when the BBC awarded Woman Footballer of the Year amid similar debates. These aren't one-offs, they're part of a growing pattern, and patterns like this, they don't sit quietly.
If you want to have a separate category, have a trans category. Or have trans women compete against men, which is their biology. Isn't that the scientific way to resolve this?
I don't have a solution. What I started this section of the conversation by saying that how you handle trans athletes is a frontier in sports that does not yet have a full solution.
Here's where Neil deGrasse Tyson comes in, dropping knowledge like a scientist who's just had enough of everyone pretending not to understand basic biology. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He acknowledges the biological advantages trans women can bring to the table. But Neil doesn't stop at science. He steps back and says, okay, this isn't just about sports anymore. It's about navigating a world that's changing faster than our rules can keep up. He's not here to cancel anyone or throw down a verdict. Instead, he's pushing for something rare, actual progress. Of course, this is where things get messy. On one side, you've got the fairness argument, keeping sports as level a playing field as possible. On the other, there's the push for equality and inclusion, which can't just be ignored. Tyson's trying to walk that tightrope, pointing out that we need to have these uncomfortable conversations and figure out a way forward. Not an easy feat when everyone's shouting from opposite corners, but hey, someone's got to try. And Neil is just saying, we should stop dividing athletes by sex and start grouping them by hormone levels instead. Yep, you heard that right. Scrap the age-old male versus female setup and sort them by what's happening chemically inside their bodies. Sounds bold, right? It is. And trust me, this idea has everyone either nodding along or losing their minds.
Of creating categories within a sport, splitting them in the example I gave, which I just made it up, like hormone ratios, is not fundamentally weird compared to dividing wrestlers by weight.
No,
because
it is.
the only
It is.
reason why you
I'm
do
gonna
this
respond.
is to make an interesting contest.
No, Neil, you're wrong.
And so you said Floyd Mayweather.
Here's why it matters. Hormones, especially testosterone, play a massive role in athletic performance. They're like the cheat codes for muscle mass, stamina, and recovery time, all the stuff that gives athletes an edge. Tyson's idea is that if we sort by hormone ranges, we might finally get a fair playing field that doesn't completely ignore biology. It's logical, it's innovative, and, let's be real, it's making a lot of people very uncomfortable. Of course, Piers Morgan was first in line to call this ridiculous because, well, that's what he does. He argued that physical advantages go way beyond hormones. He brought up lung capacity, bone density, skeletal structure, all the things that don't just vanish when hormone levels change. Piers even dragged Caitlyn Jenner into the mix, pointing out how she transitioned but still played golf off the men's tees because she realized her physical advantages didn't magically disappear. And yeah, it's a fair point. But Tyson wasn't about to back down.
In sports that does not yet have a full solution. And I made up an example, like maybe you could divide people by hormones. I don't know if that would work physiologically, but at the end of the day, we watch sporting events because they are competitively interesting. And so something's going to have to get resolved there, and I don't have that solution.
I do.
I do. I just tossed up hormones.
You have a trans category, or you have the trans women compete against biological men, which is what they are.
He hit back with some logic that even Piers couldn't completely dismiss. Sports already group athletes in unconventional ways to keep things fair. Well, look at wrestling. They don't pair people based on gender. They go by weight classes. Why? Because nobody wants to watch a heavyweight pin a featherweight in 3 seconds flat. Tyson's just suggesting we apply that same thinking to gender. It's not perfect, he admits, but it's worth asking if the system we have now actually works. Here's where Tyson really dropped the hammer. He argued that the whole point of sports is to create an exciting, unpredictable contest. Nobody tunes in to watch one side dominate so hard that the outcome feels inevitable. That's not competition, that's a snooze fest. If trans women consistently dominate women's sports, he warns, it could turn off audiences and undermine the integrity of the competition. And let's be real, he's got a point. Who's sticking around to watch a game that's basically over before it starts?
If you had a gender-neutral Olympics, how many women, biological female women, would win?
Dude, let it go.
The answer is literally like they might win one or two.
I'm trying to stay above. You're creating this world that makes great clickbait.
No, I'm not. Honestly, I'm not. No.
But, of course, Piers had his own solution. Just create a separate category for trans athletes. Sounds simple enough, right? Tyson didn't think so. He pointed out that isolating trans athletes in their own division might do more harm than good. How many trans athletes would even compete? Would there be enough to make it viable? Or would it just end up sidelining them even more? Tyson wasn't here for quick fixes. He was here to spark a real conversation. And that's the crux of his argument. Sports aren't just about identity or biology, they're about creating matchups that are actually worth watching. He compared it to the NFL and college football. The worst NFL team would crush the best college team, no question. But people still watch college games because the competition is balanced. That's what keeps it exciting. Tyson's saying we need to rethink fairness in the same way. It's not about erasing identities or ignoring biology. It's about making sports fair and fun for everyone involved. Sure, Piers kept pushing back, saying Tyson's vision was too idealistic and wouldn't work in the real world. But Tyson wasn't claiming to have all the answers. He admitted this is uncharted territory, a frontier where science, society, and fairness collide.
People are thinking about it. Top people are thinking about it. And I'm not going to be the one who will have that solution.
Fair enough.
But at the end, I know when you're watching sports, you want to watch people who have equivalent talent compete. Otherwise, it's not interesting.
He's just saying we need to stop shouting past each other and start figuring this out, because ignoring it isn't an option anymore. Piers leaned heavily on analogies to weight classes in sports like boxing and wrestling, where athletes are divided by size to keep things fair. And yeah, it makes sense not to throw a lightweight into the ring with a heavyweight. But Neil deGrasse Tyson wasn't buying the comparison. He pointed out that weight is a simple, measurable factor. Trans issues, on the other hand, are a cocktail of biology, identity, and societal norms. Tyson made it clear that creating a separate category might look like fairness on the surface, but it could easily backfire. Instead of integrating trans athletes into the sports world, it could end up isolating them even further. Fairness? More like segregation with a shiny PR spin. But Tyson didn't stop there. He zoomed out, as only he can, to look at the bigger picture. He called this issue part of a larger societal frontier, a messy, uncharted territory where identity, fairness, and human rights collide.
That is social media, and then participates in that exchange. So
why can't you
let's
just
talk about science?
Why can't you just say this is not scientific and scientific Americans should do better?
And as the debate unfolded, Tyson kept circling back to one key point. This isn't a problem any one person or policy can solve. It's going to take input from athletes, scientists, policymakers, and, most importantly, the trans community itself. Tyson urged people to resist the temptation of quick fixes and to approach the issue with an open mind. Because, let's be real, yelling past each other isn't exactly getting us anywhere.